Okay, today we're talking about Shemitas Kesafim. It's a little different than our usual. But in the business, we're saying, well, no screen, no slides. Yeah.
I can set this projector if you want.
It's not worth it. Okay, so the Torah talks about the agricultural laws of Shemitah, which is what we've talking about until now. The whole first 6 sections were about that, the agricultural halachas. Those were Parshas Bahar, mainly Parshas Bahar, and the Torah calls those halachas calls that Shvius and Shabbos and Shna Shabbosin. Okay, Torah doesn't use the word Shemitah to describe the agricultural halachas that we're used to. Those halachas, the Torah uses the word Shemitah when it describes Shemitas Kesafim. That at the end of the 7th year, loans are canceled. We'll talk about that, what that means in a second. But the term Shemitah is not used to describe the agricultural laws. It's used sort of in passing in Sefer Shemitas when the Torah says Vashvias Tishmetena Untashta. So that word Tishmetena is from the word Shemitah, and that means avodas karka. It means avodas karka. But the word, the title that we call it, or we call the year of Shemitah, is really not the way the Torah calls it. The Torah calls it Shvius. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, tell me what you think. Okay. So
you could say it refers because the next parsha, that parsha is like a Shemitas Kesafim. But it's referring to that year that you know about already from parsha. Okay.
The Torah says Karva Shnas Zera Shnas Shemitah Shemitas Kesafim.
And the parsha is
what?
The parsha I'm going to tell you.
When it's describing the halacha that says that you don't pay back loans, it says Karva Shnas Sheva Shnas Shemitah. No, that's not Hashmitah. That whole part is so much. No, it's
Shemitas Kesafim. Tell you that's not Hashem, and I spoke to you about Bahar. Which not a Shemitah Karka.
No. It's not what it's talking about. No. So the it's just
it wasn't Moish not a Shemitah by
Hakel also. Yes, correct. It's by Hakel also. So that I thought why it's by Hakel is because the time when you do the mitzvah of Hakel is right after Shemitas Kesafim. It's 2 weeks later. I'm going to talk about that. Okay, but yes, we're going to get that. But that's how it is. Okay, so it's you're not even writing it out. I'll tell you in a second. Just hold this second, So it just made me wonder. This is not a very deep question, but it made me wonder. The Mishnayos are called Masechta Shvius, okay, which is what the Torah calls it, because most of Masechta Shvius is about what you left the avodas karka. Okay, it made me wonder why did the Rambam call it Hilchos Shemitah v'Yovel and not Hilchos Shvius v'Yovel? Okay, if the Mishnayos are called Masechta Shvius, because that's what most of the halachas about the Shvius part of it, not about the Shemitah part of it. So why does the Rambam call it Hilchos Shvius v'Yovel? So I don't really know the answer, and I tried to find the answer in Moshe Sefer and Bavli to Rambam. I thought I'd find the answer in there, but I think I don't have the right chelik. There's going to be 4 chalachim eventually. He only printed the first one so far. I think in a later chelik is coming to explain all the titles and the headings and all those things is in a later chelik, which I haven't gotten yet. Hasn't come out yet. But anyhow, I thought maybe an answer like this. You like it or don't like what I say, which is like this. We saw way back when. That there's a machlokes in the Gemara whether when you count Yovel, does the 50th year, the Yovel year, count towards the next cycle of Shemitah? And what's the din? The din is that it does not count. So year 49 is Yovel, is Shemitah. Year 50 is Yovel, and year 51 is not the second year of Shemitah. Year 51 is year number 1. Okay, it's a machlokes in the Gemara. We pass it that it's year number 1. So when you talk about the mitzvah, the Torah calls it, what is it? It's the 7th year. It's Shavuos. It's the 7th year. Because when you're talking about just from the perspective of Shemitah, after you have 6 years of working you in, then you have a 7th year when you don't. But if you're going to call the title of this thing the halachas of something and Yovel, if you call it Shvius v'Yovel, you're giving the false impression that it's every 7th year. And it's really not every 7th year. It's really, it's not, so we have to use a different name. If you call it Shvius v'Yovel, then you think it's every 7th year and every 50th year, but it's really not. It's really not every 7 years. It's really 14 years every 100 years. So that's why I use the name Shemitah instead of your Shvius. What did it say?
It's that because the halachas of Shemitas Kesafim are more shaykh throughout the year, even in goes. In that
So he's being nice to the us
No,
people.
so the reason why we call it that is because we call it was Shemittas, more Shemittas.
Hagam, I mean, the Rambam is not writing from just for us. I mean, he's writing
No,
for...
but still, he wasn't living there as Israel.
Okay.
It's very sad if you use Lashon Torah, Lashon Chazal, Lashon Foshas Chalom.
Right, but they're both Lashon Torah. They're both, and Lashon Torah and Chazal. The Torah calls it Shvi'ez, and the Mishnah is called Masechta Shvi'ez. So they're both Lashon, it both. It qualifies for both sides.
It's like, you ask the Rambam, we call it Shemitah.
Yeah.
The Chazal called it nice Shemitah.
It's not called Masechta Shvi'ez, it's called Masechta Shvi'ez.
No,
It's not just to be nice to the Chassidim, you know, they have Shvi'ez and Shvi'ez, you know. Okay, so as David mentioned, the din is that the Shemittas Kesafim happens at the end of the year. Shemittas Kesafim happens completely at the end of the year. So come Rosh Hashanah, by Rosh Hashanah in a couple of months from now, that's when the Shemittas Kesafim will happen. There is a sheet of the Rosh, which is we don't pass like, and the Rosh says Shemittas Kesafim has 3 parts to it. Okay, and he says the 3 parts are, you write the Pruzbul, we'll talk about Pruzbul soon, but Pruzbul you write before the beginning of Shemitah. During Shemitah, the din is you're not allowed to collect your loans. And only after Shemitah do the loans get actually canceled, and your mechuyev will talk the rush. And only after Shemitah, the din is that the loan is actually canceled, and your mechuyev to say, we'll talk about in a second, there's a thing you have to say that you're not collecting loans. So the rush holds this in 3 parts. The principle is at the beginning, the collecting is in the middle, and
takes a loan during Shemitah.
that's what to talk about. Not for us, because it's not the din. That's what to talk about. They talk about that, what the sheet of the Rosh. So, the Rosh holds this in 3 parts. It's not all at the beginning of Shemitah, it's not all the end, it's broken apart into 3 parts. Okay, but that's not the din. Okay, so, continuing on, the mitzvah of Shemittas Kesafim, that loans get canceled, is not a mitzvah Tluy B'Aretz. Not like Shemittas Karka that's Tluy B'Aretz. It's a mitzvah that's not Tluy. It's not a mitzvah Tluy B'Aretz, so it's noig in Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz also. But as we learned quite some time ago, the din is that you only have Shemittas Kesafim when you have the mitzvah Yovel. And since nowadays you don't have the mitzvah Yovel, so the mitzvah Shemittas Kesafim is only din D'Rabbanan. It's a D'Rabbanan, but it applies in Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. There's no difference. There's no difference between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. It's not a mitzvah Tluy B'Aretz. Now, what I just said to you, that it's noig in Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz, that's the din, and that's everybody says that. But you should know that there's like an undercurrent, we shouldn't talk about, that what my say is, people just completely ignore the din. People living in Chutz La'aretz completely ignored the din. Okay, they ignored it to the point that the Rosh says like this, the Truth of Rosh says like this. He says there's a din, it's a Gemara, that says that if a person comes to Beis Din and said, I had a Pruzbul, I wrote a Pruzbul, but I can't find it, that's good. He's allowed to say that. He wins. It's accepted that he said that. Hagam, that he has no paper to prove it. Okay, he's allowed to say that. Why? Because it's so easy and everybody would do it, then you should write that. So the Truth says like this. He says, by us, it's so uncommon for people to write a Pruzbul that he says, every single time somebody walked into Beis Din and said, I had a Pruzbul and I lost it, he would cross-examine the guy, and every single time, at the end of the story, the guy was mocked that he was lying. Not once did it happen that the guy actually was telling the truth by the end of the story. So the Rosh says, so that din of the Gemara is not in the game anymore. He says, because there's so nobody writes it. He says that Mamish is so rare that someone should write a Pruzbul. He says, forget it. No one does it anymore, that you can't even have that time. The Gemara says you're allowed to have the time. No, you're not allowed to have it.
So, but obviously the Loinim was smart enough to claim they don't want to pay.
Well, at that point, by the time the Torah was sitting next to him, say you had a Pruzbul, say you had a Pruzbul. The guy was prompting him like what to say.
Yeah, the Loinim was smart enough.
Yeah.
You don't do slave ball.
So that's how it is. But Lamai says, of course, the din is Yom too. The Ramah wants to be Melamed Schus on the people who didn't. The Ramah brings to be Melamed Schus on people who didn't keep the din. There is a sheet of Trum Sadeshin that it's only in Chutz La'aretz and the lands that are right near Eretz Yisrael, which is not the din. And other Achronim who have other answers to try to be Melamed Schus. But Lamai says the din is that it does apply. It's become more popular, not like in times of Jews Rush, that people write Pruzbuls now. People take it more seriously. Okay, the din of Shemittas Kesafim only applies to loans. It doesn't apply to other obligations that people have to one another. So, in other words, if the end of the month of Rosh Hashanah comes out, after Rosh Hashanah, we're all going to get paid for that month. Okay, even seriously, we can't say, we owe you the money. If we owe you money, we don't have to pay it because now Shemitah ended. What did you say? If you wrote a Pruzbul, if you did. If you would write one,
Yeah, the baby because I wrote Pruzbul.
if you would write a Pruzbul, right? But let's say you didn't write a Pruzbul.
Okay.
Then the Shemittah couldn't say to you, sorry, we're not paying you because you didn't write it, because something you owe somebody for other obligations that you have to people you have to pay. If you buy something in the store and you didn't pay up for it, you have to pay. What? It's only for loans or things that would turn into a hafla. You know what I mean? If the store would say to you, we're zakfin al the nova, we change your buying on credit into a loan, then taka Shemitah would knock it off. Okay. When the Torah says that you have this mitzvah of Shemitas Kesafim, it says it has two different descriptions to the mitzvah. One is lo yigais Yisraelu, which is to say you're not allowed to demand payment. That's what the Torah says. The lender is not allowed to demand payment. And it also uses a different wording, an odd wording. It says v'zed dvar hashmita, and the Gemara, the Mishnayos say that v'zed dvar hashmita teaches us that there's a dibur that has to happen with shmita, and the dibur is that if the person offers you to pay back, you're not allowed to ask him. That's what you guys. You're not allowed to ask him for the money. If he offers you to pay back, you're required to say I don't want the money, and turn it down from the person. You're required to speak it out that you don't want the money. If the person says he wants to pay you anyhow, which Chazal actually encourage you to do, Chazal encourage you to pay back. Chazal encourage you to pay back even though the guy can't ask you for the money and he's going to turn you down. Chazal encourage you to pay the guy anyhow. So then you're allowed to take it. But the person's supposed to say, you're not supposed to say, I'm paying you back the loan. As long as he keeps saying, I'm paying you back the loan, you have to keep turning him down. If he says, I want to give you a present, then you can take the money. And in fact, Reb Chaim Kanievsky points out that if the guy says it from the beginning, here, I want to give you a present. I know I don't owe you the money, but I want to give you a present, then you're not going to say anything back. That v'zed dvar Shemitah is only if he says, I want to pay back. If he says, I know I don't owe you the money, but I want to give you a present, then you can take it from the get-go. Okay, we're going to talk about Pruzbul in a second, but as you know, just for what I'm about to say, Pruzbul means a takana of a way to be able to collect loans even after this time passed. Okay, the Chinuch says that the reason, we don't usually talk about these things, but the reason why there's such a mitzvah, Shemitas Kesafim, like where did that come from, such a mitzvah? He says it teaches us two halves of the same coin. It teaches us to be generous to people and be willing to give things of ours to somebody else, and because I'm going to give you money and you may never pay me back, because if Shemitah ends, you won't have to pay me back. And that comes from the person gets to be able to do that from a bitachon. The Rosh Hashem's taking care of him. The Rosh Hashem says, give the guy the money, don't worry about it, he's not paying you back, that's what I want you to do. So it teaches a person to trust the Rosh Hashem's going to take care of him. If you follow what he wants, he's going to take care of you. And the Mela, we understand that leads us to Pruzbul. We understand that the reason why Hillels and Sakin and Pruzbul, the Gemara says that the word Pruzbul means that it's good for Malvim and Levim. It's good for both sides because you can collect your money and you can get loans also. But you missed the motion. But we talked about it safer. But the
Which one?
but the
Out of Egypt.
but no, not. But the Gemara does not say that's not the reason why he made Takana. The Takana of Pruzbul was not made in order to help people collect their loans. The Takana of Pruzbul was made in order so that people would want to lend money. What was happening was, since people couldn't collect, they were very firm, they wouldn't collect the money at the end of Shemitah. In the Mela, they did exactly what Torah said. They stopped lending money because they were afraid they wouldn't be able to get it back. So that's an Issa D'Oraisa. Nowadays, Shemitah is only D'Rabbanan. The Shemitah stuff is only D'Rabbanan. Lending people money is a mitzvah D'Oraisa. So in order to make sure people would keep doing the mitzvah D'Oraisa, Hillel from Sakin Pruzbul, we're going to talk about in a second what that was, he made that takana. So it's because the point of the mitzvah is not to lose money. The point of the mitzvah is to keep people lending, even though you know you're not going to get it back. If people would stop lending, then they missed the whole point. Okay, they missed the whole point of the mitzvah, and the mitzvah he made this takana that you should have a Pruzbul.
If somebody asks you on $1 million loan, like two days before Shemitah, say, how you going to pay back? I don't know. It's the right to get a loan?
I don't know. Well, if he asks me for $1 million, I'm not of any advice because it's not.
No, if you have a plan to pay back, of course you someone's together. You have the plan. Say the plan, and then there's no line of Shemitah.
That's the plan, right? Okay, I don't know. Okay, so the Gemara says that the din of a Pruzbul only works is only for nowadays when it's in mitzvah D'Rabbanan, and this din of making a Pruzbul is connected to the din of Moshe Shtarosov Lebezin. Okay, which means is it's connected to the din of Moshe Shtaros of the Bezin, that if you give your Shtaros over to Bezin, then Bezin, you can collect. Okay? So exactly what the connection is, this is a machlokes, what's the connection between these two dinim? Okay? What I mean is a machlokes is that, well, if Pruzbul is Moshe Shtaros of the Bezin, then who needed Hillel to tell us that you should do this thing? If there's such a thing as Moshe Shtaros of the Bezin, if you give your Shtar to Bezin, it says, well, you guys say, but Bezin could collect for you. You can't collect, but Bezin collect for you. So if Bezin could collect for you, so then who needed Hillel? What did he come over? What was his big kiddush? I mean, if it's Moshe Shtaros of the Bezin. Okay, so there's three mahalchim that I saw in Rishonim to answer that question. It could be the Rambam, right? I didn't see that. But three mahalchim in the Rishonim to explain what it was that Shemitah did, what that Hillel did. So Rashi learns in a few places that Pruzbul and Moshe Shtaros of Lebezin are identical. It's exactly the same thing. But the din of Moshe Shtaros of Lebezin, Hagam, that the Sifri says that it's a drasha from a pasuk, that Lo Yigas is Re'ehu, but Bezin could be No Yigas for you. It's an asmachta. And it's completely a din d'Rabbanan. It's midaraisa, there's no way to collect your money. It's a din d'Rabbanan that you can collect the money. And Hillel created that din. That asmachta is Hillel talking. He made up that asmachta. So it's not a question, what's the difference between them? There's no difference, they're exactly the same thing. Pruzbul is the way we call when you do Moshe Shtaros of Lebezin, which is all a creation of Hillel. So since Shemittas on the Rabbanon, so the Chachamim can remake their din.
It's a separate Mishnah, isn't it? In Shemitas, isn't there two a Mishnah that says, the first Mishnah says Moshe Shtaros of Lebezin, Mishnah from Mishnah Beis, and then later on it says
Could be.
But the time, that was a kasha, if it's time
Okay, that's a fair question, Rashi. I don't know the answer to that. Okay, could be. So,
I've been learning this.
Is it Taisa?
I know a little bit.
Okay, so Taisa says.
I've been learning the sugyas.
Okay, good. Taisa says that really it is the same thing. It's true. Pruzbul and Moshe Shtaros of Lebezin is really the same thing. But what happened was that and if Bezin had to have someone shtaros, then Bezin would have collected their money. That's fine. That's the rights they could do that. But Chazal didn't tell anybody that there was such a loophole. Okay, it was a loophole. Obviously, it's undermining the din. The Rosh doesn't want you to find a way to collect it. The Rosh wants you to let the loans go. That's what he had in mind. Obviously, that's what he had in mind. So there happens to be a loophole if you give it to Bezin. But Chazal didn't tell anybody about that loophole. Came along Hillel and saw that first one was only the Rabbanan now, but also so that people in Mamela weren't lending and missing the whole point. So Mamela, he let out the cat out of the bag to let people know about that. And if you remember, we spoke about this when we spoke about the Heta Mechira. That it was one of Rav Kook's explanations when people said to him, if the Heta Mechira works, how come no one thought of it for the past 2,000 years? People have been keeping Shemitah for 2,000 years, 3,000 years they've been keeping Shemitah, and it's really hard to keep Shemitah. Why didn't everybody do this before he didn't make it up, but before people in the modern era came along, where was everybody until now? So he has a few answers to that question. And one of them was that it's just like Mechiras Chametz. He says the same thing like Mechiras Chametz. He said Mechiras Chametz is buried in a Tosefta someplace, okay, that nobody used to do it until a few hundred years ago. It wasn't common that people did Mechiras Chametz. So it was a kind of a thing that the Chacham Itzhaka was effective. The Chacham didn't want to reveal it because it would take away from the whole point of the mitzvah. At the right situations, when things were at the right point, that's when it became. So Mechiras Chametz became popular when Yidden started owning a lot of whiskey companies and they needed to do it. And Shemitah became popular. The Mechiras had the Mechira at its time. Okay, so
people didn't keep food in a long time ago.
What do you mean?
They didn't have refrigeration. They didn't keep food in general.
And
They
did.
spoiled.
So
that
it wasn't such a big deal.
So I get rid of the chametz, just eat it up.
You saying you don't keep your food for more than 2-3 days anyhow.
Right.
Okay, that's a good point. Look, he doesn't say that, but that's a good point.
Oh, it's gummer, for sure. Right? They could have preserves and things like that. You're right.
Yeah.
Nowadays,
Okay, that's a good point.
Whiskey, so was
That's a
able
good
to
point.
store it.
So it actually didn't start when whiskey started, but
point.
a few hundred years later when Yidden started being in the whiskey business, that's when it started. Okay. Okay. The third answer the Ritva says is like this. He says, when Moshe Shtaros of Lebezin only works if you, first of all, your halva has a star to it. It can't be a milval pet. It has to have a star, and you have to hand the star to the bezdin. And you hand in the star to the bezdin. You collect this loan. I can't get the money. You get the money from the guy. So if you mamish give your star to bezdin and say, bezdin, please collect for me, then let's say that works with the raisa. What do you say?
It's literally.
No, it's just you have to give them to Bezin. But what happened was that, and it's true, people could do that. But some people didn't have a milva with a star, And some people didn't want to give their star to Bezdin. They didn't trust them, So they didn't trust the Bezdin. So they didn't want to give their star and say, "Here, you collect it for me. Yeah. So we'll take care of it for you." So they didn't trust them. So Mamela, Hillel's chiddush is that you could do it even for Milval Peh, and you could do it even without physically giving over the star. You just have to say to Bezdin, "You're taking care of this for me, right? And I'm your agent, right?" And then you go ahead and collect the money. And then you just do it for the Bezdin. So the chiddush was that you could do for Milval Peh, and you didn't have to physically give over the star to the Bezdin. But once you did what you had to do, you're using Moshe Shrosh of the Bezdin, but in a very watered down way.
So according to the Ritva, would be l'chatchila the best thing is to hand it over to a Bezdin on a deraisical level and let them say...
Yeah, when Shemitah stuff will be the right, so you should do that. But it's not now, it's only Rabbanan. So Pruzbul he'll say you should do that. Okay? There's a hashkafa question here, which is, what happens if I decide, when I get up and say, you know what, I'm very firm. I don't have to worry about this. I want to not have a Pruzbul. I'm going to let my loan go. So he goes. So the question is whether that's... Okay. So the question is whether that's what Hill had in mind that you should do. In other words, did Hill was just giving this to people who needed it like a crutch, or Hill wanted everybody because maybe if the mood is that everybody does it, people will keep lending money. If all of a sudden everybody starts saying, no, it's nishra ins, we don't need to write a person, we'll let the loan go, then you'll stop lending money to people because you'll be embarrassed. I'm not sure. Okay. Anyhow. Let's switch some pages, sorry. Okay. One of the questions about making a Pruzbul is whether the person is mechuyev to stand in front of the Bezdin. Does he actually have to show up in front of the Bezdin and say to them, "Rabbis, I want to write a Pruzbul and I want to be able to collect my loans"? Okay, so it starts from Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says that Pruzbul
right
in your basement, in your pajamas,
You don't need any before you, right?
Right then, I'm giving over my chayvus to this Bezdin. You know who.
Right.
No Adam?
Right. So it starts from Yerushalmi, and the Shiloh revolves around the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says you could write a Pruzbul a few nesunim beroimi, even if they're in Rome. Okay, but Yerushalmi doesn't tell you what they. Even if they are in Rome, what's they? Okay, so it's a machlokes to show what the they is referring to. Okay, the Mordechai says it means that even if the Dayanim are in Rome, even if the Dayanim, you're here and the Dayanim are in Rome, that's fine, no problem. You can write the Pruzbul, meaning, in other words, you don't have to show up. You don't have to be in front of them. They're in Rome, meaning they're far away. Okay, that's how the Ramban learns. That's how the Mordechai learns. The Ramban and the Rashi Tzivili say it means no. It means even if your Shtaroisa are in Rome, even if your Shtaros are in Rome, so you don't have them to be Moishe Shtaroisa of the Bezdin. Of course you're standing in front of the Bezdin, but you don't have your Shtaros to give to them. That's okay. That's the takana is that you can do it even if you're not handing the Shtaros to the Bezdin. That's good enough. As long as if the Shtaros don't have to be, that's like the chiddush of Hill. Okay, both of these fit with what the Ritva we just said, both of them. Okay, obviously if the Bezdin is in Rome and you're here, you're obviously not giving them your stars either. You're obviously not handing them your stars if they're in Rome. You're not FedExing your stars to them. So the din is, the Ramah says, like the Mordechai, that you're not mechuyev to sit in front of the Bezdin. Okay, you're not mechuyev to sit in front of the Bezdin. Hagam that there will be a big tekes here, come before Rosh Hashanah. The Bezdin will have official hours that people can come and write the Pruzbul in front of them. But the din is you're not mechuyev. What?
What's that?
It's going to be a whole big... Yeah, there's going to be a whole big tekes, and people are going to walk in, and there's going to be time for people to sign the shit. It's a Hebrew word. Like a show, like a whole, but the din is not mechuyev. Okay? So, okay, two other parts that are related to the Bezdin. The first is connected to this, which is, the Mechaber says, you mechuyev to write your Pruzbul, you're mechuyev to do your Pruzbul with Bezdin Choshev. Okay, what does a Bezdin Choshev mean? It means it's people who know Hilchos Shemitah, and they've been memuneh by that place to be the Dayanim. Okay, so you can't just find three guys in the street and say to them, "We want you to be my Bezdin." You have to have a Bezdin Choshev. What? Right. You have to do Bezdin Choshev. That's a good example of it. The Rama says the minig is to be mako, and even to use anybody, any three guys is fine. In order to be Bezdin Choshev. So there's a little of a deal. I don't know if you could quote what you want to what the Mechaber says. We don't pass like that, but the Mechaber says like this. Actually, just in the sheet of the Mechaber, Rabbi Fadia says that Sfardim, I guess who should be doing like the Mechaber says that it's better to use a Bezdin Choshev but not show up in front of it, then the other way around. Now, I just told you that you're allowed to, you don't have to show up in front of the Bezdin. So that means, let's say I live in Timbuktu, okay, and there's no Bezdin Chashuv over here. So I could either have a choice to find 3 Shmendriks in the street and do my Pruzbul with them, or I could sign on and say, I'm signing on with the Bezdin Chashuv of the CRC. Okay, I'm using them. So I'm not in front of them. Okay, so which one should I use? So he says the preferences, the Mechaber says that you should use a Bezdin Chashuv, the Ramaz Baker, but the Mechaber says you should use a Bezdin Chashuv, so he says you're better off using the Bezdin Chashuv that's not where you are, because you're not mechuyev to stand in front of the Bezdin, so you're better off doing what the Mechaber says to use a Bezdin Chashuv than to stand in front of 3 people and who are not a Bezdin Chashuv.
You have to notify them later on?
No.
Nothing.
No.
So write down a piece of paper, I heard you might start to the Bezdin Chashuv.
Right, correct.
So our text is really for smart. What you're saying. Our text is really for smart.
No, you don't have to stand in front of it. No, it is, there are those who are like it. Okay, now,
Bonds anyway.
there's a deal, which is like this. The Mishnah says, there's a Mishnah Moed Katan that says that, list off a bunch of things that you're allowed to do on Chol Hamoed because it's Davar Avod. Because if you don't do today, you're going to lose your chance, and therefore you're allowed to do them. Okay? And one of those things that's listed there is that you're allowed to write a Pruzbul. Now, Chol Hamoed comes always at least 6 months before you have to write your Pruzbul. Right? The Chol Hamoed that precedes writing a Pruzbul is on Pesach. Okay, so it's at least 6 months before you mechuyev. If it's Sukkot, you blew it. You're too late to write your Pruzbul. So you have to write it on Pesach beforehand.
Less than 6 months.
Whatever, be'erach 6 months, okay? Yeah, if it's a different year, you know. So be'erach, I'm saying exactly. So it's be'erach 6 months before Rosh Hashanah. So what does that mean? What does that mean that it's a davar ha'avad? What are you going to lose your opportunity? It's not like the guy who owes you money happens to be passing through town. What's the problem? You have 6 months to write the Pruzbul. What's your rush to write it today? Why are you davar ha'avad to write it on Chol Hamoed? So if you say that the din is that you're going to write in front of a Bezdin Chashuv, use the Bezdin Chashuv, well, maybe the Bezdin Chashuv is not going to be here. Maybe I passed through a town that could do it, or they're disbanding, or something's going on with these people. But if I can use anybody, I have 6 months to get my act together. What's the big rush to get it done today? So it's a deal to say that you have to use a Bezdin Chashuv. It's not the din. The din is that you don't need to use Bezdin Chashuv, nor do you have to sit in front of them.
You have to have both choices. You can use Bezdin Chashuv and you have to be in front of it.
No, it may not be have to be in front of them. It could be there's something else that's going to go on that'll mess up your. Maybe the Bezdin is closing down.
Write on a piece of paper?
What?
Just need to write on a piece of paper.
Maybe the finance committee is meeting next week and it's going to disband the Bezdin. You know, I don't know. I'm saying it's at least within reason that something could happen. That there's a reason why if I don't get these guys, I'm finished. Okay, you're right. If I have to stay in front of them, it makes it even more so. But at least there's some possibility. But if I could use anybody, then what's the big deal? You know, what could be the... Okay, I'm not sure if I'm right. I mean, you have to realize also, is that... Okay. Okay, the next shaila is the V'Tumim and others are mesupik whether the dayanim for a Pruzbul are allowed to be related to the people involved. Okay, in a normal din Torah, of course, the person can't be related. But over here, there's nothing. They're not deciding anything. They're not making any decisions. They're just sitting there. I mean, they just sit there. They don't do anything. They don't participate. There's nothing. There's no din that's being happening. They just have to be a bezdin to take your piece of paper. So on the one hand, I mean, usually dayanim are not allowed to be related.
That they're the ones who are getting involved, officially taking the whole.
What's the difference? What's the difference? You don't even need the borrower to be here. And not this is a din Torah. I just stand in front of them and say, I read my sister. What am I?
Okay.
So it's a shayla. They're something about it. One of the rayas that he brings is that the din is that a Pruzbul that's mukdam is kosher, which is to say, if let's say I write a Pruzbul today, I write a Pruzbul on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and I write that the date of that Pruzbul was Rosh Chodesh Iyar of the year beforehand. So then it's kosher. Why is it kosher? Because a Pruzbul is only effective from the date that it says in it. So it's not good for loans that happen afterwards. So if I make the Pruzbul to be mukdam, then I'm lessening my koyach. I used to be, really I can collect loans all the way till Rosh Hashanah. Now by making it mukdam, I'm losing months worth of loans. I'm not going to be able to collect. So I'm so to speak hurting myself. So a Pruzbul that's mukdam is kosher. That's the din. So Tum says, wait a second, how can it be kosher? if you write it's mukdim, maybe the day after, let's say you were for Rosh Chodesh Iyar, or maybe on Lag BaOmer, one of the Dayanim got married to your sister. Okay, so in other words, by writing it mukdim, you're making it look kosher when it's really not. If the din is that the people are not allowed to be related, but maybe you'll write it mukdim will make will create a pruzbul that's kosher, which was really not kosher. Because really, by the time you wrote it, by the time it came Erev Rosh Hashanah, you weren't allowed to write a pruzbul with these people because one of them is married to your sister. So what do you do? If you're writing it mukdim, you're cheating and you're misleading people. So he says, so Mamela, that's a possible raya that being related makes no difference. Of course, you could argue that, we're talking about a din d'Rabbanan, and this possibility that maybe the Dayan is getting married to my sister, maybe it's wishful thinking that Dayan is getting married to my sister, but it's like, come on, I'm on a din d'Rabbanan to be choishes that the guy is being mocked it, and you can really easy to write a principle, so it's a little maybe pushing it. Okay, that's a possible right, and he has another right also. Lamaisa is, them supit, the Umvatum and others are super about it, and Dayan Weiss says that you could be makel. Okay? And it's okay if the people are related. Okay, one more thing and then a few little things, and that is, you can only write a Pruzbul if the person who borrowed the money has land. The person who borrowed the money, either the person who borrowed it has to have land, or the person who lent it has to have land, and give over, some of that land to the person who borrowed it. So, how do you give over the land to the guy who borrowed it? Okay, you realize that if I give you 10 cents worth of land, now the $100 that you owe me, you're going to have to pay me back. I can't write the Pruzbul unless you have land. So I give you the land with Zachal Adam Shalom.
What's the reason why you have to have land?
I don't know. So
even though it helps even on a Milval pet.
Right. So the din is, so I could do it with Zachal Adam. So there's an obvious question. Okay, why is it Zachal Adam? Why am I doing this guy a favor? Zachal Adam means you can give someone something that's for their schus. It's not for his schus. I'm giving him 5 cents worth of land, and in exchange, I'm going to be able to collect $100 worth of a loan. So how can it be that you could do Zachal Adam? So the Smart says like this. He says, look, Shemittas Kesafim is only d'Rabbanan. This that the loan becomes only d'Rabbanan. So Chazal allow you to look at it in a very narrow sense. And in a very narrow sense, getting land is a schus. So if I say I'm going to give you the land, that's a schus. So you got the land, that's a schus. Hagam, in the big picture, it's not really a schus. Okay? Now, what the Smart doesn't say, but seemingly it's important, is that if not for that din, if not for that ability to, so to speak, force the guy to take a piece of land, the whole din of Pruzbul would fall apart. Because Pruzbul is not to collect money. Pruzbul is there to help encourage people to give loans. Okay, well, lots of the people who need loans don't own land. That's the kind of people who need to borrow money. So if the din is that anybody who doesn't have land is not allowed to, you can't ever use a Pruzbul. You can't use a Pruzbul on the guy who doesn't.
That's why they need the loans.
If you can't make a Pruzbul for people who don't have land, then no one's going to lend those people money. So the ability to, so to speak, force the guy to take your piece of land is crucial to make Pruzbul work for the people who need it most. Okay, so the Smart doesn't say that, but that's part of what's going on over here. Is that this idea that we're like letting you get away with this is to build the whole thing.
Why didn't I make it a Zachal Shavana? He wanted karka.
Because he wanted the loan.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you mean
You say to having people borrow money.
he likes having Pruzbul. The concept of Pruzbul he likes. Okay, but
This
for me,
person does not want
right, for this one, he doesn't want. This piece of land, I'd rather be...
And also, you can't force the guy to talk on the guy because says, I'm not Makabal any karka. You can't say...
So the Achronim talk about that, whether in this case, whether you could force the guy. But if the guy's not here, no. It's not, we're not talking about when the guy said that. We're talking about it, I walk into Bezin, I say, Bezin, I'm giving him this little piece of land and it's his. And we just assume that it's Achronim. It's not Achronim. Where's this here? That's the overall question. I'm not talking about whether the guy actually said he doesn't want it. Okay? So Yaakov's saying is that no, maybe over here, if you look at the really, really big picture, not the picture of my loan, you look at the really, really big picture, then it is good for me because overall I like that he lent me money in the first place. Okay.
Otherwise you never would have lent money
in the first place. So if I look at the really big picture, then that's what it's like. Okay, that's not what the Smart says, but maybe. Okay. Now this din that you have to have karka has an nafkamina for certain people. Okay, the nafkamina that came out was Yaakov's nafkamina is for Bachram. Okay, a guy comes to me in Erev Rosh Hashanah and says, "Can I borrow $1 to buy a soda?" Okay, so you give him $1. Well, now time for him to pay up the loan. Has to get like Pruzbul. Okay, neither the malva or the loiva has karka. Okay, it's two guys. I mean, his bed in the dorm doesn't count. You know what I mean? So what's he gonna do? So how are they gonna write a Pruzbul if neither of the people has money, has karka? How are they gonna write a Pruzbul? Okay, so the solution is I didn't say the Peskin, but Shulchan Aruch says that when it says you have to own karka, it's enough if you own even an otzet nakov. Okay, so you have a pot of dirt. Okay, you don't even have to own the land that the pot is sitting on. Okay, so if you own a pot, otzet nakov, so we're going to
Selling flowers everywhere.
yeah.
Selling it everywhere.
The Carl's going to be sending it out before Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, send it out as a fundraiser. Send out pots for people. A Pruzbul pot.
You know, a Pruzbul pot, you can even write it on it, you know, we'll make your own birthday.
Pruzbul pot.
You know what, that's fundraising for this year.
With the nusach on the
We're looking for ideas for outreach. And we'll have it stamped by our basement. You know what?
So that's it. They need to
Bring
do.
it up at our meeting.
Yeah.
Fundraising.
Not that I know of. So the
Then it's another.
okay. Let me.
There, so?
Well, I'm gonna.
Others not, takes on the government.
Okay, I'm gonna
Send me that.
just remind you of three things that I mentioned before. And I raised that. So we're talking about Pruzbul now. One is you could do
When they do a tower, you know how they do that? We'll put that in the packet. You know, we do have a tower division here.
you could do a Pruzbul. Just a reminder, we can do a Pruzbul even from Milwaukee. A Pruzbul has to be written before the end of Shemitah. If you're writing after Shemitah, it's hopeless. You blew it. And a Pruzbul only works for halvos that happened before you wrote the Pruzbul. Doesn't work for halvos that you wrote.